Hello and welcome back to the Property Investor's Handbook. I'm your host, Adam Bell, and today we're looking into one of the really critical factors in property investment, and that's picking your location. Now, the right location can make or break an investment and really plays a big part in how well it's going to perform for you. So here to help us identify prime investment areas and the things that go into choosing your location, again, is Colleen Sutherland from Sutherland's Property Management Group. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Adam.
Okay, so why is location so important when choosing where to invest?
Because what you're looking at is the growth. So again, you begin with the end in mind. So you've done all your research. So you decide on an area and then you decide on the property.
Sure.
So that's the basic of location. Yes.
Okay. So as we sort of break this down, locations, do you select a property, the type of property you're looking for first, or maybe look at location first and then work out what's the best property? Which comes first, the chicken or the egg here?
I think it's the location. That's me personally, because you want to know that there is infrastructure around you or going in around you. And the infrastructure means, whether it's highways, it's public transport, and then it comes down to shopping centres, CBDs, that sort of thing, train stations. And that's what tenants are looking for. So you're not looking for a property that you would love to live in. You're looking for a property that is most popular to tenants.
To tenants. So that's a very important point, isn't it? That when looking at the property and taking the location is not to think like, well, would this suit me?
No.
It's would this suit the bigger population and the people who would be considering living here.
If you've gone that far into research for an investment property, you need to take the emotion out of that, buying that property. Would I live here? And it's like 9 times out of 10, no. But it's a necessity. It's an area that probably needs tenants because there's lots of demand in that area, that sort of thing. So the next thing you look at, if you've chosen your location, then you choose, is it going to be a house, a townhouse, a unit, that sort of thing. And that will depend on the budget.
Yep.
Because clearly houses are going to be more expensive, but then in a body corporate situation, you have body corporate fees.
Sure. So probably a tough question here. If you're looking, you found the area that you're looking for an area that's going to have great amount of growth. You find something that, ticks all the boxes on that, but it's not the greatest property when it comes to being tenantable, if that's a word. Have you seen this before where it's a great spot for capital growth, but you've come in as a property manager and, well, there's a few things here that really are going to make this hard to find a good tenant for?
Yes, I have, but if your budget is dictating what you can buy, that might be the only area you can afford to buy in, or you're bought this old unit because it is a development site. But what you need to take into consideration is the condition of the property. It's always tenantable because it's probably going to be cheaper.
Sure.
But your initial investment, it's cheap for a reason.
Sure.
So don't expect, again, major prices, increases, that sort of thing, because it's cheap for a reason.
Sure. Okay. Now, how would investors maybe be able to research and identify up-and-coming neighbourhoods, for want of a better phrase?
There are sales agents out there who just concentrate on these new pockets of development.
Sure.
And when you're buying in that area, ordinarily 9 times out of 10 it would be an investor who buys the property.
Yep.
So you're surrounded by investors, and the whole estate will be tenants, but there could be maybe 10% of owner occupiers. Initially it will be investors, and then as those investors sell their properties, it will often go to first home buyers or downsizers and that sort of thing, that then the tables turn towards a owner-occupier estate.
Sure. Now, you mentioned amenities and infrastructure a little earlier. How important, are they when selecting a property to invest in? Having that access to public transport, being close to shops, being on a train line that takes you into the city. How important is that when, looking at an investment property?
I think it's vital because when you're renting it, you can promote it as it's close to the train station, walking distance to the train station, the shops are just up the road and all that sort of thing. So I think it's vital. So then when you go to sell it, you say the exact same thing, but you're targeting a different audience and it will go right across the board. So the infrastructure in the area is quite vital.
Right, and something I hadn't thought of until you mentioned it then. I was thinking of that in terms of, the rent you can get in terms of being able to market it to potential tenants, but I didn't think about, of course, when you go to look at selling that property, very important that those things are there to be able to get the very best price for the next buyer who comes along.
Yes, that's right. And when you're looking at a rental or a sale, they're fairly similar style of audience, as in the rental will want that infrastructure, but when you go to sell it, it's close to, XYZ. So an owner-occupier would want to buy that.
Sure. Have you had investors come to you and ask for your advice? Because it's probably not something that a lot of people think of, to go and talk to property. They think of a property manager, I would imagine, after they've gotten the property or as they're doing the deal, but maybe not beforehand. But I'm thinking there's a lot of benefit in talking to you or others or property managers who have a lot of properties in that area to talk to first.
Yes, and it would be a good idea if you're talking to the right property manager, because there are property managers who only have their property manager's cap on, not this is an investment and this is what our experience to be, because they may not experience that. So you'd have to strike it lucky to get a property manager who actually knows about all this stuff.
Right.
So what we do is we manage the property that will increase the value of the property. So when you go to sell it, and you probably will, or you'll gift it to your children, you know that your money is working hard for you and we're looking after that money. Because it's one of the biggest investments other than your own home to make.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it was something we were going to bring up in another podcast, but we ran out of time. But I was thinking the accidental, what you call the accidental property investor. Explain what that is, firstly, for our listeners.
That is my term.
Yep.
Because
also, it's not I thought that was a term across the industry. That's your term.
It may well be, but that is my term. It's like landlords in protection insurance.
Yep.
We call it human nature insurance.
Right.
I don't know whether everybody else does.
Okay.
Because,
yep.
So as an accidental investor, that may mean they have a job transfer to another state or another suburb, but they don't want to sell their house. They want to retain that because they have every intentions of coming back. Or it could be on a normal market, I can't sell this house, but I need to move, or I'm going overseas, or whichever it might be. So we'll put a tenant in there. They're the two main investors. They become investors. And the other one is an inheritance. So it could be that you've inherited the property and you want to hang onto it and get the benefit out of it for 2 years without the tax implications. So, and again, you've just fallen into a property that you're renting out and you know nothing about it, then that's where you'd go to property management or property manager and ask for their professional advice on how to rent it. They can't tell you why, but they can tell you how.
Sure. And, of course, get good advice on what maybe you need to do to the property in order to make it, more suitable as a rental, because in all of those scenarios you've just talked about, the house is there as, for an owner-occupier, isn't it? And there are certain things that you need to be aware of with a property, that stark differences for an owner-occupier versus a rental, isn't there?
There is. So I have a checklist if anybody is interested in getting a copy of that checklist. But the other thing is if you're an accidental landlord and you're going to move away, but I have every intentions of coming back, what you need to pack in those boxes when you're packing to move is your emotion, because it goes from a home to a business.
To an investment, yeah.
Yeah, so the investment should be treated as a business. So
That must be hard for someone who's planning on moving back.
It is, because that's where we used to get, I don't want any pets in my house.
Right.
So, and we used to be able to do that.
But can't
we can't
anymore.
do that anymore. So if you've got an allergy to cats, and that all these tenants have cats that are applying for it, it's too bad, because I have to put them in and you have to deal with it when you get back.
Look, this is really interesting, and perhaps we need to do a full podcast on this, Colleen, because it's just opened up a can of worms in my mind.
Each one does.
Because a lot of properties are actually built these days for investments. Literally, you know, they're built to within an inch of
the boundaries.
Yeah, and they don't do anything to the gardens. Everything's as low maintenance as possible, but when you think about, this where someone's lived in a home, cared for it, loved it. I've said a few times, I rent, and I would love to have done a whole heap of stuff to the place I live in, but I don't, because it's a rental. I think, what's the point? I would have loved to have landscaped the gardens and, you know, all the things you would do if it was your own place, which someone will do if it is their own place. But if they're
Correct.
then turning it into a rental, and then they see someone come in and just let all that go, you know, within... reason.
Yes. So the tenant is responsible for the garden. So let's just take the gardens for example. They are responsible for the maintenance of the garden if it's basic. But if you've got luscious landscaping and hedges and fruit trees and all that goes along with owning a home, I would recommend to you to have a gardener come in once every month, 6 weeks, and include it in the rent. So the tenant doesn't have to look after all those hedges or fruit trees or whichever, and someone will come in and take care of it for you. Yep. And so when you become the tenant, I say to you, and you don't even have to look after the hedges and the fruit trees, because the landlord has someone coming around, and then, you know, you adjust the rent accordingly.
You're keeping it to the level
Correct.
that you want. You've got to take that on yourself if for whatever reason you want to do that.
Yes.
Yep. No, very interesting. So, look, coming back to location, how can investors balance affordability with desirability when selecting a location? That must be one of the toughest things.
It is a tough thing, but if you're doing it solely for an investment, you need to really have your investor's cap on.
Get rid of that emotion, as you've said.
Yeah, the emotion will wreak havoc on you, because you're thinking, but that house needs painting and it needs new carpet. Like I said at the start, it's cheap for a reason. So you're going to bring it into the 21st century, but then you'll get a 21st century price for it. And then you've got those capital gains and tax deductions at the end of the financial year. So your investment is not immediate. Don't think that you're going to get an immediate, this is a great idea, it's going to cover everything. What it is, you're investing the money, and the money's going to work for you, but it will come back to you in the equity. So if you then need to borrow money to buy your next investment property, this investment property that you've only spent $350,000 on, with your improvements, it could be worth $450,000. So you're able to borrow money against the equity of that one. So it's really a complex thing when you go that far into it. But just remember, if you're buying a place and it's cheap for a reason, you need to do some work on it.
Sure. Well, look, thank you once again. Another really insightful episode. And look, I want to implore anyone out there listening or watching this, you know, whether you've got investment properties now or thinking about it, have a chat to Colleen and think about it, talking to a property manager before you do it. It's probably not something you've thought of before. You think about talking to accountants and developers and even financial advisors or even real estate agents. They're the ones but for maybe more an impartial view, talk to a property manager. All those others really, you know, have reasons of why they would tell you, but a property manager will give you the lowdown, and something I'm sure you wouldn't mind giving to anyone who's looking at investing.
I will. Yes.
Fantastic. All right. Well, look, stay connected with us here at the Property Investors Handbook. Every episode, we've got insights and practical advice, and we love having you listening. Reach out to Colleen and her team. One person in your team that we haven't mentioned a lot about is Bree, but Bree is wonderful at what she does and has been doing this for, well, how long's Bree been in the business?
She's been with me nearly 12 years.
Wow.
I know. So I must be doing something right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So reach out if you need anything at all. And look, thanks again for joining us on the Property Investors Handbook.
Thanks so much, Adam.